The year was 2347. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Dominion for exactly 100 years. 100 years of bowing heads. 100 years of paying taxes to alien masters. 100 years of sending young men and women to die in wars that were not their own. The aliens saw humans as useful tools, strong enough to work, brave enough to fight, but never smart enough to be a threat. Admiral stood on the observation deck of his ship, the GSS Harmony. It was the finest ship humanity was allowed to build. The Dominion had given them permission to construct it, like a master giving a dog permission to have a new collar. Was 63 years old. His hair had turned from decades of service. His eyes had seen too many friends die in alien wars, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to witness. Every screen on every human ship, every human world, every human station was showing the same broadcast. The Dominion wanted everyone to watch. They wanted the whole galaxy to see what happened to those who did not obey. The planet on the screen was called New Sol. It was the largest human colony outside of Earth. 12 billion people lived there. 12 billion men, women, and children who had built cities, planted farms, raised families, and dreamed of better futures. They had refused to pay the new taxes. The taxes were impossible to pay. Everyone knew this. The Dominion had designed them to be impossible. They wanted an excuse. High Lord, the ruler of the Galactic Dominion, appeared on the broadcast. He was massive. His species stood 3 meters tall, with scales like black iron and eyes like burning coals. He had ruled the galaxy for 800 years. No one had ever challenged him and lived. "These humans have refused to pay their fair share to the Dominion," announced. His voice was cold and empty of any feeling. "Let this serve as a lesson to all lesser species. Obedience is not optional." The first bombs fell at exactly 6 in the morning, Galactic Standard Time. They did not target military bases. They did not target government buildings. They targeted schools where children were starting their day. They targeted hospitals where the sick were being healed. They targeted homes where families were eating breakfast together. The Dominion wanted maximum death. They wanted maximum horror. They wanted the galaxy to understand what happened to those who said no. On Earth, 3 kilometers beneath the Himalayan mountains, Fleet Marshal watched the broadcast in the most secure bunker humanity had ever built. She was 57 years old, small in height but enormous in presence. She had led humanity's military for 15 years, always playing the role of the obedient servant while building something else in secret. Tears ran down her face as she watched city after city burn. The screens showed everything. Parents trying to shield their children with their own bodies. Doctors carrying patients from burning hospitals. Young couples holding each other as fire consumed them. The Dominion cameras captured every death. They wanted the suffering to be seen clearly. General stood beside her. He was a large man, a soldier's soldier who had fought in a dozen campaigns for the Dominion. His hands were shaking. His voice cracked when he spoke. "They are not even trying to hit military targets," he whispered. "They are just killing everyone they can find." The broadcast lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of watching 10 billion human beings die. Old people and bobbies, students and teachers, workers and artists. 10 billion lives ended to make a point about tax collection. When the last city fell silent and the last transmission turned to static, something in the room changed. The air itself felt different. Marshall wiped her eyes. When she looked up again, her tears had stopped. Something cold had taken their place. Something that the Dominion had never seen in human eyes before. "Activate Protocol Omega," she said. Her voice was quiet but steady as stone. Every officer in the room stopped breathing. Protocol Omega was a legend. A story passed only between the highest commanders. A plan so secret that most of the military did not believe it existed. It was the plan humanity had prayed they would never need to use. Admiral's voice came through the secure communication channel. He was still in orbit, still watching the smoke rise from New Sol's grave. Marshall, are you absolutely certain? Turned to face the communication screen. Her eyes were dry now, dry and cold and full of something terrible. They killed 10 billion of our people. They broadcast it to the whole galaxy. They wanted everyone to see humanity brought to its knees. They wanted us to beg. They wanted us to break. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of 100 years of hidden rage. Instead, they will see us rise. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, in places that did not exist on any map, lights began to turn on. Machines that had been sleeping for 100 years began to wake up. Computers that had been waiting in darkness began to run calculations that would change the galaxy forever. The Dominion had made a terrible mistake. They had watched humanity for a century. They had seen humans bow and scrape and obey. They had seen humans send their soldiers to die in Dominion wars without complaint. They had seen humans pay every tax, follow every rule, accept every insult. And they had believed that this was what humanity truly was. They did not understand that every bow was a lie. Every payment was a distraction. Every soldier sent to their wars was also a spy, learning Dominion tactics and weaknesses. For 100 years, humanity had played the perfect slave while building the tools of revolution in the shadows. The Dominion had wanted to teach the galaxy that resistance was useless. They had wanted to show that humanity was weak and broken. Instead, they had just given humanity something it had been waiting a century for: permission to stop pretending. In the command bunker, Marshall turned to her officers. These men and women had trained their whole lives for this moment. They had inherited this burden from their parents, who had inherited it from their parents before them. "Send the message," she ordered. "Let them know what is coming." Across every human world, every human ship, every human heart, a single message was broadcast. Simple words that carried the weight of 10 billion dead. You showed us no mercy, expect none in return. And somewhere in the cold darkness of space, the first ships of the Shadow Fleet began to move toward the light. For 100 years, humanity had been the perfect slave. They paid every credit the Dominion demanded. They sent their sons and daughters to fight in wars they did not understand. They accepted insults with smiles and bowed their heads when alien masters walked past. The galaxy looked at humans and saw a broken species that had learned its place. The galaxy was blind. 3 days after New Sol burned, the leaders of humanity gathered in a chamber that officially did not exist. The room was carved from solid rock, 5 kilometers beneath the surface of the moon. It had been built 80 years ago by workers who had taken their secrets to their graves. Not even the Dominion's best spies had ever found it. Marshall sat at the head of the long table. Around her were the finest minds and strongest warriors humanity had produced: admirals and generals, scientists and spies. All of them had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. Doctor stood to address the council. She was 45 years old, with sharp eyes and steady hands. Her grandmother had started the project she now led. Her mother had continued it. 4 generations of geniuses, working in complete secrecy, had created something the galaxy had never seen before. "The Dominion believes they understand our technology," began. "They have inspected our ships. They have studied our weapons. They have measured our capabilities and decided we are no threat." A cold smile crossed her face. "They have seen exactly what we wanted them to see." She touched a control, and the center of the table lit up with a holographic display. The officers around the table gasped. Some of them covered their mouths. Others simply stared with wide eyes. "We call it the Shadow Fleet," continued. 300 dreadnought battleships, each one larger than anything the Dominion knows we can build. 2,000 heavy cruisers, 15,000 destroyers, all constructed in secret facilities hidden inside asteroids, buried under moons, or floating in the empty darkness between stars. General, a veteran of 30 years of warfare, leaned forward to study the display. His face showed disbelief. "The Dominion has 50,000 capital ships," he said slowly. "How can 300 compete with 50,000? Smile grew wider. "Because the Dominion's ships are designed to fight other Dominion-level technology. Their weapons, shields, and tactics have not changed in 10,000 years. Why would they change? No one has challenged them successfully in all that time." She changed the display to show a single ship. It was sleek and angular, beautiful in a deadly way, like a blade made of black glass. It looked nothing like any vessel in the galaxy. "Our ships are different. We spent a century studying every species the Dominion has conquered. We analyzed every weapon system they use. We mapped every tactic they employ. And then we built specific counters to all of them." Captain, commander of the carrier Indomitable, examined the technical readouts floating before her. She was young for her rank, only 32, but she had proven herself in a dozen battles. Her eyes widened as she understood what she was seeing. "These shield frequencies," she whispered, "they are tuned specifically to resist Dominion plasma weapons." "Not just resist," replied. "They make plasma weapons completely useless. The Dominion's entire fleet could fire at us all day, and they would do less damage than throwing rocks." Intelligence Director stood to speak next. He was a thin man with quiet eyes that missed nothing. For 30 years, he had been building a network of spies across the galaxy. Agents hidden in every Dominion world, every Dominion fleet, every Dominion government office. "The Dominion has ruled through fear," he explained. "But fear is a weak foundation. There are 17 species currently living under their control who hate them deeply. The whose forests the Dominion burned. The who are used as living computers and treated like machines. The Prism Collective whose was sterilized to make an example. All of them are waiting, hopping, praying for someone to strike the first blow." Marshall stood, every eye in the room turned to her. "Then we will strike that blow," she declared. "But we will not strike blindly. We will not strike in rage. We will strike in cold, calculated fury. We will plan every move. We will anticipate every response. And we will win." She walked to the star map that covered one entire wall. Thousands of stars glittered in the darkness, each one representing worlds under Dominion control. "The Dominion expects us to surrender. They expect us to beg for mercy. They expect us to send diplomats with tears in their eyes, promising to be good slaves forever." Her finger traced a path across the stars, from the edge of human space to the heart of the Dominion. "Instead, we are going to carve a path of fire directly to their throne world, and we are going to broadcast every step of the way, just as they broadcast the death of New Soul." Admiral spoke for the first time. His voice was heavy with the weight of what they were about to do. "Many of us will die in this war." "Yes," agreed. "Many will die, but our children will live free. Our will never know what it means to bow before alien masters, and 10 billion souls on New Soul will be avenged." She looked around the room at the faces of the men and women who would lead humanity into the fire. "The Dominion has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. They believe they are eternal. They believe they are unbeatable. They believe they are gods." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow everyone heard every word. "They are about to learn that they are mortal, and we are about to teach the galaxy that humans do not stay broken." The orders went out through channels so secret that even most of humanity did not know they existed. Ships began to move from hidden places. Soldiers who had waited their whole lives for this moment began to prepare. Weapons that had never been fired in anger began to power up. And humanity's message was broadcast across every channel in the galaxy. "Are coming." Station Prime was the mightiest fortress the Dominion had ever built. It guarded the border between Dominion space and the outer regions where lesser species lived. 14 massive battle stations floated in perfect formation, each one bristling with enough weapons to destroy a planet. 300 warships patrolled the surrounding space, crewed by the finest soldiers in the Dominion military. For 10,000 years, No enemy had ever passed Station Prime. Most had never even tried. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, the flagship of the Shadow Fleet. Around him, 300 dreadnoughts waited in the darkness between stars, invisible to every sensor the Dominion possessed. They had traveled here through routes no one knew existed, using engines that broke laws of physics the Dominion thought were unbreakable. "Status report," ordered. Lieutenant looked up from her tactical station. She was young, only 26, but she had been training for this battle since she could walk. Her father had died in a Dominion war. Her mother had worked herself to death paying Dominion taxes. She had personal reasons to be here. "All ships in position, Admiral. The enemy has not detected us. They are not even at full alert status." Nodded slowly. The Dominion had grown careless over 10,000 years. They had forgotten what it felt like to be surprised. They were about to remember. "Weapons free," he said quietly. "All ships engage." The Shadow Fleet appeared out of nowhere, like ghosts becoming solid. 300 dreadnoughts, 2,000 cruisers, 15,000 destroyers, all arriving at once in a perfect sphere around Station Prime. The Dominion commanders had perhaps 10 seconds to feel confusion before the first shots were fired. The weapons humanity had built were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Antimatter warheads that erased matter from existence. Kinetic rounds fired at 1/5 the speed of light, hitting with force that cracked moons. Electronic attacks that turned the enemy's own computers against them, making ships fire on their friends or simply shut down completely. The Dominion plasma cannons fired back. Thousands of shots, each one capable of melting through conventional hull armor. The plasma hit the human shields and simply stopped, disappeared, did nothing. The Dominion crews watched in disbelief as their most powerful weapons proved completely useless. Station Prime's commander, a veteran of 100 campaigns, tried to call for reinforcements. His communication systems were dead. He tried to organize his ships into defensive formation. They could not receive orders. He tried to retreat. His engines would not respond. The human electronic warfare systems had taken complete control of every Dominion computer in the region. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it ended, Station Prime was gone. Not captured, not damaged, gone. 14 battle stations and 300 warships had been reduced to expanding clouds of hot gas and tumbling debris. The gateway to Dominion space, the fortress that had stood unbroken for 10,000 years, had been erased in less time than it took to eat breakfast. Appeared on every screen in the Dominion. His face was calm, his voice steady. Behind him, the scattered remains of Station Prime glittered in the starlight. "This is Admiral of the United Terran Navy," he announced. 10 billion humans died for the crime of existing. Consider this our opening statement. We are coming for you. Run if you can, hide if you must, but know that we will find you, and we will not stop until justice is done. The broadcast ended. Silence fell across the galaxy, and then slowly the silence began to break. On the jungle world of, they had lived in underground bunkers for a century, ever since the Dominion burned their forests to punish them for some minor offense. Elder watched the broadcast with trembling antennae. Around them, millions of watched the same images. Humans had done what no one had done in 10,000 years. Humans had hurt the Dominion. "They fight back," whispered. "They actually fight back." The decision was made without discussion. Every knew what to do. They had been waiting for this moment for generations. Within hours, the Dominion garrison had been overwhelmed. Alien soldiers who had spent decades bullying the found themselves facing millions of angry insects with nothing left to lose. By the end of the day was free. They were next. They were silicon-based beings, living crystals who could interface directly with computers. The Dominion had forced them to serve as processing cores, treating them as machines rather than people. When the broadcast reached them, they simply stopped working. Billions of Dominion systems crashed simultaneously. Ships lost navigation. Factories stopped producing. Communication networks went dark. They walked away from their masters, and there was nothing the Dominion could do to stop them. On the prison world of Nexus 7, 1 billion slaves from 100 different species saw the broadcast. They saw the mighty Dominion brought low by the species they had dismissed as primitive. They saw hope for the first time in their lives. That night, the prisoners rose up. By morning, they controlled the planet. High Lord received the news in his throne room. His massive body trembled with rage. His black scales rippled like a storm-tossed sea. Around him, advisors who had never known fear began to understand the meaning of the word. "One human fleet," growled, his voice echoing off the ancient walls. "One fleet destroys Station Prime, and half the galaxy forgets its place." Grand Admiral, the highest military commander in the Dominion, chose his words very carefully. "My lord, perhaps we should consider negotiating. The humans clearly have capabilities we did not anticipate. A peaceful resolution might be." "Negotiating?" Roar shook the chamber. Priceless artwork fell from the walls. Advisors stumbled backward in terror. With humans, those primitive creatures who were digging metal from their own asteroids when we had already conquered 1,000 worlds. He rose from his throne, towering 3 meters tall, a mountain of black scales and burning fury. "Summon the Imperial Armada," he commanded. "Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we possess. We will burn Earth itself. We will destroy every human colony. We will hunt down every human in the galaxy and end them. We will make New Sol look like a gentle warning." The Dominion war machine began to move. 50,000 capital ships from every corner of the Empire. Trillions of soldiers armed with the finest weapons 10,000 years of conquest could provide. The greatest military force ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. They did not yet understand that this was exactly what humanity was counting on. The Imperial Armada was the largest military force ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. 50,000 capital ships, each one capable of destroying cities with a single shot. Trillions of soldiers who had conquered 1,000 worlds. Weapons that had broken every enemy the Dominion had ever faced. High Lord himself commanded from the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, a ship so massive that it had its own gravity. Moons could orbit this vessel. Entire civilizations could live within its hull. Watched the stars streak past as his fleet traveled toward human space. He felt no concern, no doubt. The humans had surprised him once. They would not surprise him again. Numbers always won in the end. The Dominion had 10,000 years of proof. "My lord," Grand Admiral reported, "we are entering the outer regions of the human solar system. Their fleet appears to be holding position near Earth. They are not advancing to meet us." Smiled with rows of knife-sharp teeth. "Of course they are not. They know they cannot defeat us in open battle. They are hoping their tricks will save them. They are wrong." The Armada pushed deeper into the solar system, past the frozen rocks at its edge, past the gas giants with their countless moons, toward the small blue world where humanity had been born. Imagined it burning. Imagined the oceans boiling away. Imagined the screams of 8 billion humans as they paid the price for daring to challenge him. Then Commander's voice crackled across human communication channels from the Lunar Command Center, buried deep beneath the moon's surface. "The Armada has entered the cloud. They are in perfect formation, exactly as predicted." Marshall stood in the center of the command room, surrounded by holographic displays showing every ship in the enemy fleet. Her face was calm. Her voice was steady. This was the moment 100 years of preparation had been building toward. "Activate the gauntlet," she ordered. Throughout the solar system, humanity's true defenses revealed themselves. Every asteroid in the belt had been hollowed out and filled with weapons. The moons of Jupiter and Saturn opened like flowers, revealing hidden missile batteries and energy cannons. Automated defense platforms that had floated in darkness for decades powered up and locked onto targets. The Dominion had sailed into a trap so vast that they could not even see its edges. But these defenses were merely the teeth of the trap. The true weapon waited at Earth itself. "They are deploying a planetary shield," reported to, confusion creeping into his voice. "But these power readings do not make sense. My lord, the energy they are generating. It should not be possible." For 100 years, humanity had been building something unprecedented in galactic history. A swarm. Millions of collection satellites orbiting their own sun, harvesting a tiny fraction of its endless power. Most species thought such a project was theoretically impossible. Humanity had done it in secret, one satellite at a time, hidden from every Dominion sensor. The power flowing from the sun to Earth's defenses was almost infinite. The planetary shield that surrounded humanity's glowed bright blue, strong enough to withstand the combined firepower of every ship in the galaxy firing at once. And that shield was not the only thing the sun was powering. "My lord," screamed. "Massive energy spike detected. They are firing something." Project activated. A beam of focused stellar energy, compressed and directed by technology the Dominion had never imagined, lanced out across space at nearly the speed of light. It struck the heart of the Imperial Armada and simply kept going, cutting through ships like a hot blade through soft butter. When it finally stopped, 47 Dominion capital ships had ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged, erased from reality. Stared at the tactical display, and for the first time in 800 years of rule, he felt something cold growing in his chest. Fear. "That is impossible," he whispered. "No species has ever weaponized a star. The power requirements alone would be." His voice cut through his thoughts. She had hijacked his command channel somehow, broken through security systems that were supposed to be unbreakable. Her face appeared on his personal screen, calm and cold and utterly without mercy. "We have had 100 years to figure out things you thought were impossible, Lord. 100 years of playing the obedient slave while we learned your weaknesses and built our strengths. You wanted to make an example of humanity. Congratulations. You have succeeded beyond your wildest dreams." Around the Imperial Armada, the Shadow Fleet emerged from hiding. They had been there all along, cloaked by technology that bent light and fooled sensors. 300 dreadnoughts that moved faster than anything the Dominion had ever built. 2,000 cruisers armed with weapons that passed through Dominion shields like they were not even there. 15,000 destroyers coordinated by artificial intelligence systems that predicted enemy movements before they happened. And they were not alone. Behind the human fleet came more ships, the living vessels of the, grown from organic materials and fierce with hatred. The crystalline ships of the, sharp and deadly and free for the first time in centuries. The geometric craft of the Prism Collective, who had waited generations for this moment. 24 species who had watched humanity's broadcast and decided that today was the day they stopped being afraid. "You taught the galaxy to fear," said, her voice broadcasting to every ship in both fleets. "We are going to teach it to hope." The Battle of Saul lasted 12 hours. It was not really a battle. It was an education. The Dominion had spent 10,000 years fighting enemies who used the same weapons, the same tactics, the same strategies. They had no idea how to fight an enemy who broke every rule they knew. Human ships moved in ways Dominion ships could not follow. Human weapons hit targets that should have been protected. Human tactics changed constantly, adapting to every response faster than the Dominion commanders could think. And every time the Dominion tried to retreat, they found the Allied fleets waiting to cut off their escape. When it ended, the Imperial Armada existed only as debris and prisoners. 50,000 ships, trillions of soldiers, the pride of a 10,000-year empire, all of it gone in half a day. High Lord escaped on a shuttle, fleeing toward his throne world with a handful of survivors. He would not escape for long. The Dominion throne world of Nexus Prime had never known war. For 10,000 years, It had been the beating heart of an empire that stretched across the galaxy. Its cities were made of crystal and light, beautiful beyond description, built by the labor of 1,000,000 conquered species. Gardens that held plants from 1,000 worlds surrounded palaces where Dominion lords had lived in luxury for generations. The people of Nexus Prime had never seen an enemy soldier. They had never heard explosions or seen fires burning. Now they saw both. The Coalition fleet appeared in the skies above Nexus Prime 3 weeks after the Battle of Sol. Human ships flew alongside vessels and cruisers and craft from 24 other species who had risen up against their masters. The Dominion home fleet tried to stop them. It lasted 4 hours. By the end, the skies above Nexus Prime were filled with human descending like rain. Marshall walked through the shattered gates of the Imperial Palace. Her boots crunched on broken crystal. Her uniform was stained with the dust of a dozen battles. Beside her walked Admiral, whose fleet had carved a path from Earth to this very spot. Behind them came soldiers from every species that had joined the liberation, a living symbol of what the galaxy could become when fear no longer ruled. The palace had been beautiful once. Now it was a ruin, not because the Coalition had destroyed it, but because the Dominion servants had abandoned it. For the first time in 10,000 years, there was no one to clean the floors or polish the crystal or tend the gardens. The masters were discovering how helpless they were without their slaves. High Lord waited for them in the throne room. He sat alone on his massive chair, a mountain of black scales in a room that echoed with emptiness. His advisors had fled. His guards had surrendered. His empire had crumbled like sand castles before a rising tide. He did not rise when they entered. Perhaps he still believed he had some dignity left to preserve. "So," he said, his voice still carrying that tone of superiority even now, "the primitives come to claim their victory. Tell me, Marshal, do you plan to execute me on broadcast? Make a spectacle of my death, as I made a spectacle of your colony world?" Walked slowly across the vast chamber, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She stopped before the throne and looked up at the being who had ordered the deaths of 10 billion of her people. She studied his face, his burning eyes, his scales that had never known fear. She thought about new soul burning. She thought about the faces of children turning to ash. She thought about 6 hours of watching her people die while the galaxy was forced to witness. She thought about revenge. And then she made a different choice. "No," she said quietly, "that would make us like you." She gestured to the soldiers behind her. They brought forward a simple chair, nothing special, just an ordinary seat. They placed it in front of a large holographic display that had been installed in the throne room. "You are going to live, Lord. You are going to live a very long time." She activated the display. "And every day for the rest of your life, you are going to watch what comes next." The display showed scenes from across the galaxy. On they were replanting their forests. Millions of insects worked together to heal the world the Dominion had burned. On Prime, the Silicon beings were building a new society where they would never be used as tools again. On 100 liberated worlds, slaves were becoming free citizens for the first time in their lives. Lieutenant stepped forward with updated reports. The Parliament held their first free election yesterday. They have established an open computing network that anyone can join. 17 species have signed the new coalition charter. "And humanity?" asked. His voice was quieter now, confused. "You could rule this galaxy. You have the weapons, the technology, the allies. Why are you not claiming the throne I sit on?" Looked at him with something that might have been pity. "We did not fight this war to build an empire. We fought it to tear one down." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "That is something your kind never understood. Humanity does not need to rule others to feel strong. We just need to make sure no one else rules us." She left him there, sitting in his simple chair, watching the display that would be his constant companion for the rest of his days. Watching the galaxy he had terrorized transform into something better. 3 months later, The first session of the Galactic Council met on a neutral world chosen specifically because it had never been touched by Dominion influence. Representatives from every free species gathered as equals, sitting in a great circular chamber where no seat was higher than another. There were no masters and servants here, only partners. Ambassador, as she was now called, took her place among them. The former soldier had become a diplomat, trading her uniform for simple robes. Admiral commanded the joint peacekeeping fleet, made up of ships from every member species. Doctor led the technology sharing program, making sure that no single species could ever again dominate through superior weapons. On the memorial world of New Sol, now transformed into a garden planet, Captain stood before the wall of names. 10 billion names, carved into stone that would stand for eternity. She came here often, whenever she could spare the time from her new duties as head of the exploration fleet. She came to remember, to mourn, to promise the dead that their sacrifice had meaning. General found her there one evening, his hair now completely from the stress of war and rebuilding. "They are calling you a hero back at the council," he said softly. "Earth's greatest warrior, the commander who led the liberation fleet to a dozen victories." Ran her fingers over the names carved in the stone, names of people she had never met, names of children who had never grown up, names of parents who had never seen their families again. "These are the heroes," she said. 10 billion people who died because an empire thought it could kill without consequence. What we did, what humanity did, was simply make sure their deaths had meaning. We made sure that no one else would have to die like they did. She looked up at the sky, where ships from 100 worlds crossed overhead. Not warships anymore. Construction vessels carrying materials to rebuild what had been destroyed. Medical ships bringing aid to worlds that had suffered. Exploration craft preparing to venture beyond known space. "My grandmother used to tell me a story," continued. "She said that when humans first looked up at the stars, we did not dream of conquest. We dreamed of discovery. We wondered what was out there. We wanted to meet our neighbors, not enslave them." She turned to face. The Dominion tried to kill that dream. They thought they could beat the wonder out of us and replace it with fear. They were wrong. And now the whole galaxy gets to share that dream. In his prison on Nexus Prime, watched the broadcasts. He watched the galaxy he had terrorized bloom into something new. He watched former enemies become allies. He watched former slaves become leaders. He watched the humans, the primitive apes he had dismissed, reshape the very nature of galactic civilization. And somewhere in the void, humanity's first true exploration fleet departed for the neighboring galaxy. They were not going to conquer. They were not going to rule. They were going to discover what else was out there, to ask questions no one had ever asked before, to reach for stars no one had ever touched. Because that had always been humanity's true nature. Not the rage that had destroyed an empire, but the curiosity that now reached for new horizons. The Dominion had wanted the galaxy to remember the day they broke humanity. Instead, the galaxy would forever remember the day humanity set it free.